moving on to your career profile, like usually I'll sit here and pick through all of past jobs and what did you learn from them and so forth. But obviously, there's one role, and our listeners would throw me out a window if I didn't ask you about it. But from 2008 until 2016, you were the Chief Information Security Officer for the Wendy's company of Dublin, Ohio, which is, as we said, Wendy's, the burgers, Frosties, the chili. So can you break down what this role entailed and what it meant at the time to be the CISO of Wendy's? Like, what kind of problems were you addressing and solving? Was this something that was happening? Were you the CISO of like the corporate aspect or the franchises as well?
Yeah, so when I started at Wendy's, it was actually after the company that owned Arby's restaurant group that I worked for was acquired, and they created Wendy's Arby's group. But it was funny when we were talking about the need for security. When I was first hired, they said, hey, we've got this PCI thing we want to do, but we don't think security is a big enough role and enough work here. So we're going to need you to also manage telecom, unified communications, networking. And I think it's kind of funny how, that even then they're really looking for somebody technical who could do a lot of work. And oh, by the way, we need the security and compliance thing.
Right.
And so, as really the first problem I had to solve when I got there was helping them understand what security was, why it was important, and also why, if they followed my lead and we really were proactive, things would be easier. And I remember my first project for PCI, showing a slide of a dog jumping through a burning hoop and saying, every time we make a change just because of compliance, this is what we're doing. We're doing this circus act versus let's take a step back, build a foundation on defense in depth. Let's get a really mature program, and compliance will just come easier.
Got it.
And, and that's the problems we were solving, is that all of that started making sense, but then you're on a pennies to the dollar revenue model, right? And so how many hamburgers, I can't tell you how many times I heard, how many hamburgers do we have to sell to pay for that?
Yeah. Right.
But it's a fair question as well, because one of the things I heard from a mentor of mine in the past was, protect your diamonds like they're diamonds and your pencils like they're pencils. It really, I had to start solving problems of how to build a world-class security program that was cost-effective and maintainable with about 1,700 locations. So my role involved all of the corporate locations, all of the company security. And then towards the end of my time there, my team actually built a managed service for the franchisees. So we were doing managed patch management, AV, firewalls. And really what we saw was that the business, from a franchise perspective, they did not have the expertise and a lot of times the funding. And so building that program out really was going to launch kind of the next phase for Wendy's and their technology. But we also had a lot of the same problems other folks had, right? Like I remember building our first data lake and having, big data and early years of having, how do we unlock this data? How do we use this data? And, I have to admit, even in that role, there were a lot of times where I would say, we really shouldn't use that data. And here's why. We don't have an effective way to control it. And, by the time I left, Wendy's no doubt had a great program, and I stand on that based. I still do every once in a while. I go and search for the data breach that occurred within my last year or so. There was all franchise based. To this day, when I Google it, I can't find any details about what happened, and that is a successful breach handling, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure. It didn't get leaked to the tabloids. Yeah,
there wasn't a whole lot of talk there, but I think it really taught me a lot of things about how to look for more reproducible security rather than latest and greatest. So I'd say a project we had that failed there was putting application whitelisting on every point of sale. And sure, it's a great security control and, it does a lot of great things. But what we found was operationally, it was killing the team. They were not able to support the systems correctly. And so we were constantly in this state of disabling security controls to test things. And we made a decision to actually back that out and just put standard antivirus and HIPs on the workstations. And our number of events went down and our operational stability went up. And it was a good lesson for me, right, of going, and sometimes you just have to take a more simple approach based on the risks.
Put down the bazooka and pick up the fly swatter. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, two things that I wanted to sort of highlight from your responses, and how you were definitely kind of ahead of the curve of, you were thinking about things that are currently in the conversation. One is that if you create a good security posture compliance thing, you don't need to do the checkbox compliance thing. You're already ready there, and we talk all the time about not working towards the checkbox and the compliance, but like you said, building it out, and then you don't need to worry about it. And the other thing was, don't use the data if you don't have a safe way of doing it. Like I feel like that's a reckoning that's I've only been hearing about in the last couple of years here. So you were definitely ahead of the curve in that regard.
Yeah, I can't take all the credit, because I will say, as a brand, I had a lot of support there, and I think
okay.
So that is so critical. And so these are not, I don't have decision-making authority even in my current role, right? I'm an advisor and part of the business. So I did benefit from having a team to work with at Wendy's executive level to say, here are the risk, here's the reward, here's what I think, and to have that trust and have the business side with you, that's a huge win. So, but I think that's also an equal thing, right? Is learning how to build those relationships and build that trust so that the business appreciates when you're saying no. It's the last step. It's not something I like. I always taught my teams, we're not the department of no. Before you say no, come to me, because I want to figure out how we can make it a yes if possible.
Have you seen Work Bites, the new security awareness training series from Infosec? Our team produced this series with 3 E's in mind: making security awareness training entertaining, engaging, and educational. Just go to infosecinstitute.com/free to learn more about this hilarious office comedy. And hey, let us know what you think about it.